The fluorescent lights of St. Jude's Memorial Hospital hummed with a low, electric buzz that seemed to vibrate in the teeth of everyone who worked the night shift. It was 2:14 a.m. on a Tuesday, the hour when the city outside slept, but the emergency department remained a churning vortex of chaos and consequence. In Trauma Bay 4, the air was thick with the metallic scent of blood and the sharp, chemical tang of antiseptic. Nurses moved with practiced urgency, their shoes squeaking against the linoleum, while doctors barked orders that cut through the noise like whip cracks. But in the center of this storm stood Alina Vance, a nurse who seemed to exist in a different frequency entirely. She was quiet, too quiet, some said. Her movements were economical, devoid of the frantic energy that characterized the rest of the staff. She held a tray of instruments with steady hands, her eyes fixed not on the panic around her, but on the patient, a young man whose vitals were crashing faster than the monitors could update. Dr. Marcus Thorne, the attending physician for the shift, wiped sweat from his brow with the back of a gloved hand. He was a man who wore his authority like a heavy coat, bulky and imposing, designed to intimidate as much as to protect. He glanced at Alina, his lip curling in a sneer that had become all too familiar to the nursing staff over the past 6 months. "Vance," he snapped, his voice dripping with condescension. "Stop hovering. If you don't have something useful to do, go restock the supply closet. We don't need ghosts in the trauma bay." Alina didn't flinch. She didn't look up. She simply adjusted the IV line by a fraction of a millimeter, her fingers moving with a precision that bordered on the artistic. "His pressure is dropping, doctor," she said, her voice soft but clear, cutting through the din without raising in volume. "The current fluid rate isn't sufficient for the internal bleeding we suspect. We need to switch to O-negative and prepare for immediate transfusion." Thorne laughed, a harsh, barking sound that made several junior residents glance nervously at each other. "Suspect? You're guessing, Vance. I'm diagnosing, and I say he's stable enough for a CT scan. Stop trying to play doctor. It's pathetic." He turned his back on her, signaling to the team to move the gurney. "Let's go radiology now." Alina watched him go, her jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. She knew what Thorne didn't. She had seen the subtle bruising pattern on the patient's abdomen, the way his pupils had reacted to the light, the slight asymmetry in his breathing. It wasn't just internal bleeding. It was a ruptured spleen compounded by a hidden cardiac anomaly. Moving him now without stabilization was a death sentence, but she was a nurse. He was the doctor. In the hierarchy of St. Jude's, her voice was wind against a stone wall. She lowered her head, picked up the empty tray, and walked out of the bay, her steps silent, her mind racing through protocols she knew better than anyone else in the building. If you are enjoying the tension building in this story, please take a moment to hit the like button. It helps us bring these narratives to life and ensures you see more stories about quiet competence triumphing over loud arrogance. The culture at St. Jude's Memorial was not unique, but it was particularly toxic. Located in the heart of Chicago, the hospital served a diverse population, ranging from the wealthy elites of the Gold Coast to the working-class families of the South Side. It was a place where miracles happened daily, but it was also a place where egos went to feed. Dr. Marcus Thorne was the apex predator of this ecosystem. Board-certified, charismatic, and fiercely ambitious, he had climbed the ladder by stepping on anyone who slowed him down. He viewed nurses not as colleagues, but as extensions of his own will, tools to be used and discarded. And among those tools, Alina Vance was his favorite target. Alina had been at St. Jude's for 8 months. Before that, her record was a blank slate. No references from previous hospitals, no digital footprint in the medical community, just a pristine license and a recommendation from a private agency that refused to give details. To Thorne, this mystery was an invitation to mock. He called her the ghost behind her back. He criticized her uniform for being too crisp, her hair for being too neat, her silence for being too profound. "She thinks she's better than us," he would say in the break room, loud enough for others to hear. "Probably failed out of nursing school somewhere and bought her way in here. Watch her, she'll crack under pressure." But Alina never cracked. She absorbed the insults with a grace that unnerved people. When Thorne yelled, she listened. When he mocked, she worked. She arrived 15 minutes early every shift. She stayed late to ensure handovers were perfect. She remembered the names of patients' families. She noticed the smell. Things, the elderly woman who was afraid of the dark, the child who needed a specific blanket to sleep. Her kindness was genuine, but in the cynical environment of the ER, it was mistaken for weakness. They saw her gentleness as a lack of backbone. They saw her restraint as fear. They had no idea that the stillness they mocked was actually the calm of a deep, frozen lake. There were breadcrumbs if anyone had cared to look. Alina's hands, for instance. They were scarred not from accidents, but from old, healed wounds that looked suspiciously like shrapnel or wire burns. She wore long sleeves even in the summer, hiding forearms that were corded with muscle, unlike the typical build of a bedside nurse. Then there was the way she moved in a crisis. While others panicked, her heart rate seemed to drop. She didn't rush, she flowed. And once, late at night, a security guard had seen her standing in the parking lot, staring at the sky with a posture so rigid and alert it looked military. But these details were dismissed as quirks. In the high-speed world of emergency medicine, nobody had time to analyze the quiet nurse. They just wanted her to stay out of the way. We are just getting started. If you want to know why Alina is really here and what secret she is hiding, make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the moment everything changes. The first true test came 3 weeks later on a rainy Thursday night. The ER was overwhelmed. A multi-car pileup on the interstate had sent a wave of trauma patients through the doors. The triage area was a sea of groans and shouting. Thorne was in his element, thriving on the chaos, directing teams with booming authority. Alina was assigned to Bay 2, where a 60-year-old man had been brought in with chest pains. It seemed routine, a potential heart attack, standard protocol. But as Alina attached the ECG leads, she noticed something odd. The man's skin was clammy, yes, but his pupils were pinpoint. He wasn't clutching his chest in pain, he was guarding his abdomen, and there was a faint, sweet smell on his breath, not alcohol, but something chemical. Acetone? No, something else. She leaned in closer. "Sir," she asked softly, "have you taken any medication today? Any new prescriptions?" The man groaned, unable to speak. His wife, terrified and crying, shook her head. "No, nothing. He's healthy. He just collapsed." Alina's eyes narrowed. She glanced at the monitor. The heart rhythm was irregular, but not in the pattern of a myocardial infarction. It was erratic, jagged. She touched the man's neck. His pulse was thready. She looked at his fingernails, cyanotic. Blue. This wasn't a heart attack. This was poisoning or an allergic reaction to something unseen. She turned to call for Thorne, but he was across the room, intubating a young girl from the crash. He wouldn't come. She couldn't wait. The man's oxygen saturation was dropping, 88%, 85%. Alina made a decision. She didn't ask for permission. She grabbed the crash cart. She drew up epinephrine and atropine, calculating the dose in her head in seconds. She wasn't supposed to administer these without a doctor's order, not for this diagnosis. But she knew, with a certainty that defied logic, that if she waited for Thorne, the man would die. She injected the epinephrine. The room seemed to hold its breath. The monitor beeped wildly, then stabilized. The man's color returned. His breathing eased. The wife sobbed in relief. Thorne finished with the girl and strode over, his face red with exertion and anger. "What did you do?" he demanded, snatching the chart from Alina's hand. "You administered epi for chest pain. Are you insane? You could have killed him." Alina stood her ground, her voice steady. "He wasn't having a heart attack, doctor. He was in anaphylactic shock from an unknown allergen, possibly ingested. His airway was closing. The epi opened it. Check his lips. Look for swelling." Thorne looked. There, faint but visible, was the swelling of the tongue. He paused, his ego warring with the evidence. He wanted to yell. He wanted to write her up for insubordination. But the patient was alive. The vitals were stable. He couldn't argue with success, even if it infuriated him to admit it. "Get out of my sight," he hissed, leaning in close so only she could hear. "One more unauthorized move, Vance, and you're done. I don't care if you got lucky. You broke protocol. You're a liability." Alina nodded once, turned, and walked away. She didn't feel lucky. She felt tired. She had saved a life, and instead of gratitude, she had received a threat. But beneath the fatigue, there was a spark of something else, a reminder. She remembered who she was. She remembered what she was capable of. And she knew that Thorne's arrogance was a ticking clock. It was only a matter of time before it exploded. Stories like this remind us that competence often wears a quiet face. If you appreciate Alina's calm under pressure, please leave a comment below telling us about a time you saw someone underestimated prove everyone wrong. The injustice spike began slowly, like a leak in a dam, before becoming a flood. After the incident with the anaphylactic patient, Thorne didn't fire Alina. That would have been too easy, too final. Instead, he began a campaign of systematic humiliation. He assigned her the most difficult, unpleasant tasks, cleaning up after violent patients, handling the overflow from the psychiatric ward, working double shifts on weekends while he left early for networking dinners. He documented every minor error. If she was 30 seconds late with a medication, he wrote it up. If she forgot to initial a form, he called a meeting to discuss her carelessness. He spoke to her in front of other staff, stripping away her dignity piece by piece. Nurse Vance seems to be struggling with the basics, he announced during a morning briefing, smiling benevolently at the group. Perhaps we need to schedule some remedial training. We can't have standards slipping. The other nurses watched in silence. Some felt pity. Others felt relief that it wasn't them. A few, emboldened by Thorne's power, joined in the mockery. They stopped inviting Alina to lunch. They whispered when she entered the break room. The isolation was complete. But Alina endured. She didn't complain to HR. She didn't cry in the bathroom. She simply did her job, and she did it flawlessly. Her charts were perfect. Her patients loved her. The families thanked her. But in the professional realm, she was being erased. Thorne was building a case. He was creating a paper trail that would justify terminating her contract for performance issues. He wanted her gone, not because she was bad at her job, but because she was a mirror. Her competence reflected his insecurity. Her silence highlighted his noise, and he couldn't stand it. The breaking point came 2 months later during the annual hospital gala. It was a black tie event, a fundraiser for the new pediatric wing. The elite of Chicago were there, donors, board members, politicians. Thorne was in his element, shaking hands, kissing babies, posing for photos. He had invited Alina not out of kindness, but to serve. He wanted her to work the event as part of the medical support team, wearing her scrubs while everyone else wore silk and tuxedos. It was a power move, a visual reminder of her place. Alina accepted. She didn't have a choice. Refusal would be insubordination, so she stood by the entrance, a tray of water in her hand, watching the glittering crowd. She felt invisible, and in a way that was what she wanted. She was observing, scanning, assessing threats, old habits. Then the doors burst open. A man stumbled in, supported by 2 security guards. He was bleeding from a gunshot wound to the shoulder. Chaos erupted. Guests screamed. Waiters dropped trays. Thorne rushed forward, pushing through the crowd, his face alight with the opportunity for heroism. "Clear the area," he shouted. "Get me a kit now." He examined the wound, his hands shaking slightly. It was a through-and-through, not fatal but messy. He began to pack the wound, talking loudly to the cameras that had started to flash. "Stay with me, sir. You're going to be fine. I've got you." But the patient's eyes were rolling back. His breathing was shallow. Thorne wasn't checking the exit wound. He wasn't assessing for internal damage. He was focused on the spectacle, not the science. Alina stepped forward. She didn't run. She walked. She placed the tray of water on a nearby table and approached the group. "Doctor," she said, her voice low but firm. "His pulse is thready. He's going into shock. You need to elevate his legs and apply pressure to the femoral artery. The shoulder wound is a distraction. The real bleed is internal." Thorne looked up, his eyes blazing with rage. "Back off, Vance. This is not your station. Go get more gauze." "There's no time," Alina said. She looked at the patient. She saw the pallor, the sweat, the way his left leg was twitching. It was a classic sign of hypovolemic shock from a hidden injury. Maybe a nicked artery in the abdomen, maybe a shattered pelvis. She knelt beside the patient. Ignoring Thorne's shouts, she placed her hands on his lower abdomen. She pressed. The patient gasped. Blood seeped from his mouth. "He's bleeding internally," Alina said, looking up at Thorne. "Call for a surgical team, now, or he dies in the next 5 minutes." Thorne froze. The cameras were still flashing. The donors were watching. If he called for surgery and was wrong, he looked incompetent. If he didn't and the man died, he was negligent. He hesitated. That hesitation was fatal. The patient convulsed, then went still. The monitor, which a paramedic had hooked up, flatlined. Silence descended on the ballroom, a heavy, suffocating silence. Thorne stared at the body, his F. Ace went pale. He looked at Alina, hatred burning in his eyes. He had to blame someone. He had to save his reputation. "You," he whispered, pointing a trembling finger at Alina. "You distracted me, you interfered, you caused this." The crowd gasped, whispers spread like wildfire. The nurse killed him. The nurse interfered. Alina stood up slowly. She didn't defend herself. She didn't argue. She looked at Thorne with a sadness that was deeper than anger. She knew what was coming. She knew the narrative had already been written. This is the moment where everything seems lost. If you are feeling the frustration of this injustice, please share this video with a friend who needs a reminder that truth eventually comes out. Your support means the world to us. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Alina was suspended pending an investigation. Thorne gave a statement to the hospital administration, painting himself as the heroic doctor who was undermined by a rogue, incompetent nurse. He cited her history of insubordination and protocol violations. He produced the file he had been building for months, a dossier of minor infractions, twisted and exaggerated to paint a picture of a dangerous employee. Alina was called into the office of the hospital administrator, Mrs. Gable, a woman who cared more about liability insurance than justice. Mrs. Gable didn't even look Alina in the eye. She slid a termination letter across the desk. "We have to protect the hospital, Ms. Vance," she said, her voice cold. "Dr. Thorne is a key asset. Your actions, well, they were reckless. We can't have that kind of instability in the ER. Please collect your belongings and leave. Security will escort you out." Alina picked up the letter. She read it once. Then she folded it neatly and placed it in her pocket. "May I say something?" she asked. Mrs. Gable sighed. "Make it quick." "I didn't kill that man," Alina said. "Dr. Thorne did, by hesitating, by prioritizing his image over his patient. I tried to help. I will always try to help. But I understand that the truth doesn't always matter in places like this." She turned and walked out. She didn't cry. She didn't slam the door. She walked to her locker, changed out of her scrubs, and put on her civilian clothes, a simple pair of jeans and a black jacket. She packed her bag. She left her badge on the counter. As she walked out of the hospital, the rain was falling again. It washed over the city, cleaning the streets, hiding the tears of those who had no one to witness them. Alina stood on the sidewalk, looking up at the towering structure of St. Jude's. She felt a strange sense of relief. The mask was off. She no longer had to pretend to be less than she was. She no longer had to shrink herself to fit into Thorne's small world. She pulled out her phone. She dialed a number she hadn't used in 3 years. It rang once, twice. "Vance," a voice answered, deep, gravelly, familiar. "It's me," Alina said. "I'm out." There was a pause on the other end. "Are you clean?" "I'm clean, but I'm angry." "Anger is fuel," the voice said. "Bring it. We have a situation, and we need your specific skill set." Alina hung up. She looked at the hospital one last time. Then she turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the Chicago night. Do you think Alina will get her revenge? Or is something bigger happening? Keep watching to find out who she really is and why a simple nurse has a direct line to high command operations. For the next 2 weeks, Alina vanished. She didn't go home. She didn't stay in the city. She traveled to a safe house in the outskirts of Milwaukee, a nondescript cabin surrounded by pine trees. There she waited. She trained. She ran miles in the snow. She practiced marksmanship at a private range. She reviewed medical texts, not for nursing exams, but for tactical combat medicine. Because Alina Vance was not just a nurse. 3 years ago, she had been Lieutenant Alina Vance, U.S. Navy SEALs, not a regular SEAL, but a member of a specialized covert unit known as the Whisperers. Their mission was not just combat, but infiltration and extraction in high-risk medical environments. They were medics who could fight, soldiers who could heal. They operated in the shadows, saving lives in war zones where no one else could go. Alina had left the service after a mission went wrong. A mission where she had to choose between saving her team and saving a civilian child. She had saved the child but lost 2 of her brothers in arms. The guilt had broken her. She had discharged, changed her name, and tried to live a normal life. She had become a nurse to heal, to atone, to find peace in the quiet rhythms of civilian medicine. But the world hadn't let her be quiet. Thorne's bullying, the injustice, the death of the patient, it had awakened the soldier within her. And now the call had come. The situation her commander had mentioned was not a war zone. It was a diplomatic summit being held in Chicago, a high-profile event attended by foreign dignitaries, including General Aris Thorne, no relation to Marcus, but a distant cousin of the fictional nation of Krovnia. General Thorne was a controversial figure, accused of human rights violations, but currently a key ally in a delicate peace treaty. Intelligence suggested an assassination attempt, not with a bomb, but with poison, a slow-acting neurotoxin that mimicked a heart attack, the kind of thing that required a medical expert to detect and counteract, the kind of thing Alina knew intimately. Her commander, Admiral Holloway, had tracked her down. He knew she was the best. He knew she was the only one who could identify the toxin and synthesize the antidote in time. But he couldn't ask her to return as a soldier. She was a civilian, so he asked her to return as a consultant, off the books, unofficial. Alina agreed, not for the money, not for the glory, but because she couldn't stand by and watch another innocent person die due to incompetence and arrogance, and because, deep down, she missed the purpose. She missed the clarity of life and death. She returned to Chicago under a new alias. She was hired as a temporary staffing nurse for the Summit's medical team, a private contractor hired by the State Department. She wore a different uniform. She kept her head down, but she was watching. If you are intrigued by Alina's background as a SEAL medic, hit the subscribe button. We dive deep into her past in the next section, revealing the missions that made her a legend. The summit was held at the Palmer House Hilton, a historic hotel transformed into a fortress of security. Metal detectors, armed guards, surveillance cameras. Alina moved through the backstage areas, invisible to the VIPs but hyper-aware of every threat. She checked the food supplies. She inspected the water filters. She monitored the air quality. And then she saw him. Dr. Marcus Thorne. He was there as part of the local medical liaison team, a PR stunt by the hospital to show their community involvement. He was laughing, shaking hands with a senator, looking every bit the hero. He hadn't recognized Alina. She had changed her hair, her posture, her demeanor. She was no longer the quiet, submissive nurse. She was the predator. Alina felt a surge of cold rage, but she pushed it down. She had a job to do. She scanned the room. Her eyes landed on General Thorne. He was sitting at the head table, looking pale, sweating. He was holding his chest. Alina's instinct screamed, now. She moved. She didn't ask for permission. She didn't wait for approval. She pushed through the crowd, her eyes locked on the general. Security guards stepped in her path. "Ma'am, stop." "Medical emergency," she shouted, her voice commanding, authoritative. "Move." The guards hesitated. They saw the badge on her jacket, State Department Medical Consultant. They stepped aside. Alina reached the general. He was slumping in his chair. His eyes were glazed. "General," she said, grabbing his wrist. His pulse was erratic, slow, too slow. She smelled his breath. Bitter almonds, cyanide? No, something more complex, saxitoxin, a paralytic shellfish poison, refined. She looked around. Who had served him? A waiter, a young man, nervous, sweating. He was backing away. Alina didn't chase him. She had seconds to save the general. She ripped open her medical kit. She didn't have the antidote pre-made. She had to synthesize it from memory, from the chemicals in her portable lab kit. Her hands flew, drawing liquids, mixing powders, injecting. The room watched in stunned silence. Dr. Marcus Thorne pushed through the crowd, his face red. "What are you doing? Who are you? Get away from him." Alina ignored him. She injected the general. 1 second, 2 seconds. The general gasped. His eyes cleared. He took a deep breath. He was alive. Thorne stopped. He stared at Alina. Recognition dawned in his eyes. "Vance," he whispered, "what are you doing here?" Alina stood up. She looked at Thorne, really looked at him. For the first time, she didn't see a superior. She saw a small, petty man. "I'm saving lives, doctor," she said. "Something you should try sometime." The confrontation is here. If you are loving the payoff, please leave a like on this video. It helps us continue to create high-quality narratives that celebrate justice and integrity. The room erupted. Agents swarmed the waiter, arresting him. Medics rushed to the general, stabilizing him. But all eyes were on Alina. Admiral Holloway stepped out from the shadows. He was dressed in a sharp suit, his presence commanding immediate respect. He walked to Alina and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Lieutenant Vance," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Good work." The title hung in the air, Lieutenant. Thorne's face went white. "Lieutenant, what is this? Who are you?" Holloway turned to Thorne. "Dr. Thorne, I presume We heard quite a bit about you, mostly from Lieutenant Vance's former colleagues. They speak of your lack of professionalism." Thorne stammered. I don't understand. She's a nurse. She was fired for incompetence." Holloway smiled, a cold, predatory smile. "Fired? No, doctor, she resigned to protect her identity. You see, Lieutenant Vance is one of the most decorated combat medics in Navy history. She saved over 200 lives in hostile territories. She invented the triage protocol you use in your ER, and she was working undercover at St. Jude's as part of a psychological rehabilitation program recommended by her therapists, a program you sabotaged with your harassment." The crowd gasped. The senators, the diplomats, the press, they all turned to look at Thorne. Holloway continued, his voice rising. "We placed her there to test her readiness for return to active duty. We wanted to see if she could handle the stress of civilian life. Instead, we found a hospital culture that tolerates bullying, ignores competence, and values ego over patient safety. And we found a doctor who nearly killed a patient due to his own arrogance." Thorne looked around, desperate for support, but there was none. The hospital administrator, Mrs. Gable, was standing nearby, looking horrified. She realized what this meant for the hospital's reputation, for her job. "Dr. Thorne," Holloway said, pulling out a tablet, "I have here the full report of the incident in the ballroom 2 months ago, the autopsy of the patient you blamed on Nurse Vance. It confirms internal bleeding from a pelvic fracture missed by your examination. The family has already filed a lawsuit, and now with this public display of your ignorance." Thorne fell to his knees, not literally but spiritually. His career was over, his reputation was destroyed, he was exposed. Alina looked down at him. She didn't feel joy, she didn't feel vengeance, she felt pity. "You mistook my kindness for weakness," she said softly. "But kindness is not weakness, it is a choice. And I chose to be kind even when you were cruel. That is my strength, not my rank, not my medals, my humanity." She turned to Holloway. "Admiral, I'm ready to return to duty, but not here, not in this place." Holloway nodded. "Understood, let's go." Alina walked out of the ballroom, her head high. The cameras flashed, but she didn't look at them. She looked ahead, to the future, to the next mission, to the next life she would save. This is the climax of our story. If you are feeling satisfied with this outcome, please comment "Justice Served" below. Let us know how this story made you feel. The aftermath of the summit was swift. St. Jude's Memorial Hospital launched an internal investigation. Dr. Marcus Thorne was terminated for cause. His medical license was reviewed by the state board, and he was suspended pending further hearings. The hospital paid a significant settlement to the family of the patient who had died in the ballroom. Mrs. Gable resigned. The culture of the ER began to change. New leadership was brought in. Nurses were treated with respect. Protocols were updated. The ghost became a legend. Stories of Alina Vance circulated among the staff, how she had stood up to Thorne, how she had saved the general, how she had been a SEAL. Alina didn't return to St. Jude's. She returned to the Navy. She was deployed to a field hospital in a conflict zone overseas. She worked long hours in difficult conditions, saving lives in the mud and the blood. But she was happy. She was where she belonged. 6 months later, a package arrived at her forward operating base. It was from a nurse at St. Jude's. Inside was a letter. "Dear Alina asterisk. Thank you, you showed us that we can be better. We are trying. Every day we try to be kinder, more competent, more humble. You left a mark on this hospital, not a scar but a seed, and it is growing." Alina smiled. She pinned the letter to her bunk. Then she put on her gear and went back to work. We hope this story inspired you. If you want more tales of hidden heroes and poetic justice, please subscribe to the channel. We have many more stories to tell. The moral of this story is not just about revenge. It is about the nature of strength. True strength is not loud, it is not aggressive, it is not about dominating others. True strength is quiet, it is consistent, it is kind. It is the ability to remain calm in the chaos, to do the right thing even when no one is watching, and to forgive those who do not deserve it. Alina Vance was mocked because she was different, because she was quiet, because she was kind. But in the end, those were the very qualities that saved the day. Her kindness was not weakness. It was her armor. Her silence was not emptiness. It was depth. In a world that often rewards the loudest voices, remember the quiet ones. Watch them, learn from them, respect them. Because you never know who they really are. You never know what they are capable of. Before we end, take a moment to reflect. Have you ever been underestimated? How did you handle it? Share your story in the comments. We read every single one. The story of Alina Vance is fictional, but the themes are real. Bullying exists in workplaces everywhere. Injustice happens, but so does redemption, so does justice, and so does the triumph of competence over arrogance. We created this story to remind you that your value is not defined by those who misunderstand you. It is defined by your actions, by your integrity, by your service to others. So keep going, keep being kind, keep being competent, keep being you. If you enjoyed this 60-minute narrative journey, please consider supporting the channel by becoming a member. Your support allows us to research and write these detailed scripts. The end of Alina's story at St. Jude S was just the beginning of her legacy. In the months that followed, the hospital implemented a new mentorship program named the Vance Initiative, designed to support new nurses and protect them from workplace harassment. It became a model for other hospitals in the region. Dr. Thorne, stripped of his privileges, faded into obscurity. He tried to start a private practice, but no one would hire him. The weight of his own ego had crushed him. He spent his days alone, remembering the moment he lost everything, wondering if he had ever truly seen Alina Vance, wondering if he had ever seen anyone. Alina, meanwhile, continued her service. She rose through the ranks, becoming a commander. She trained new medics, teaching them not just how to save lives, but how to respect the dignity of every patient. She taught them that humility is a virtue, not a weakness. And sometimes, on quiet nights, she would look at the stars and remember the rain in Chicago. She would remember the humiliation, the anger, the fear. But she would also remember the victory. Not the victory over Thorne, but the victory over herself. The victory of staying true to her values, even when it was hard. We are nearing the end of this script. If you have stuck with us this far, thank you. Your attention is a gift. Please share this video with someone who needs to hear this message today. The narrative structure of injustice to vindication is powerful because it taps into a universal desire for fairness. We all want to believe that good deeds are rewarded and bad deeds are punished. But in real life, it's not always so clear. Sometimes the good guys lose. Sometimes the bullies win. That's why stories like this matter. They provide a blueprint for hope. They show us that competence cannot be hidden forever. That truth has a way of surfacing. That kindness, though often mistaken for weakness, is ultimately the strongest force of all. Alina Vance is a symbol of that truth. She is a reminder that we should never judge a book by its cover, never judge a person by their silence, never mistake restraint for fear. As we conclude, please take a second to hit the notification bell. This ensures you are alerted when our next long-form narrative drops. We have exciting stories coming up. The production of this script involved extensive research into medical protocols, military hierarchy, and workplace dynamics. We wanted to ensure that while the story was fictional, the emotions and the procedures felt authentic. We consulted with former medical professionals and veterans to get the details right. For example, the description of the saxitoxin poisoning was based on real case studies of shellfish poisoning, adapted for dramatic effect. The triage protocols Alina used are standard in combat medicine, emphasizing rapid assessment and intervention. The hierarchy in the hospital reflects common issues in large medical institutions, where administrative pressure can sometimes overshadow clinical judgment. We hope these details added depth to your viewing experience. We believe that authenticity enhances immersion. If you are interested in the research behind our stories, check out the links in the description. We provide resources for further learning on medical ethics and military history. The character of Alina Vance was designed to challenge stereotypes. Often, female protagonists in action stories are portrayed as physically aggressive or emotionally volatile. Alina is different. She is calm. She is intellectual. She is compassionate. Her power comes from her mind and her spirit, not just her muscles. We wanted to show that femininity and strength are not mutually exclusive, that a woman can be gentle and deadly, kind and formidable, quiet and commanding. This balance is rare in media, but it is common in real life. There are many Alina Vances out there, women who lead with empathy, who solve problems with intelligence, who stand firm in the face of adversity. To all the women who have been underestimated, this story is for you. You are seen, you are valued, you are strong. The antagony. St. Dr. Thorne represents a type of toxicity that exists in many professions. The brilliant jerk, the person who is talented but abusive, who believes that their skills excuse their behavior. We included him not to demonize doctors, but to highlight the importance of emotional intelligence in leadership. Technical skill is important, but it is not enough. A leader must also be humble, must also be respectful, must also be human. Thorne's downfall was not just his medical error. It was his inability to connect with his colleagues, his inability to listen, his inability to see beyond his own ego. If you have experienced workplace toxicity, know that you are not alone. There are resources available. Links to support organizations are in the description. The setting of Chicago was chosen for its contrast. The gleaming skyscrapers and the gritty streets, the wealth and the poverty, the noise and the silence. It is a city of extremes, much like the characters in the story. The hospital, St. Jude's, is a fictional institution, but it represents the real challenges faced by healthcare workers everywhere. Understaffing, burnout, hierarchical pressure. These are real issues that affect patient care. By highlighting these issues in a fictional context, we hope to spark conversation about how to improve our healthcare systems, how to support our nurses and doctors, how to create cultures of safety and respect. Please consider donating to local healthcare charities if you are able. They do incredible work under difficult circumstances. The pacing of this story was designed to mimic the rhythm of a thriller. Slow build, rising action, climax, resolution. We used pauses to allow the audience to process the emotional beats, to breathe, to anticipate. Narrative pacing is crucial for retention. If the story moves too fast, the audience gets lost. If it moves too slow, they get bored. We aimed for a balance, keeping the tension high but allowing moments of reflection. We hope you felt the tension. We hope you felt the relief. We hope you felt the satisfaction. Thank you for spending this hour with us. It is a significant investment of time, and we appreciate it deeply. The voiceover performance for this script would ideally be warm, confident, and cinematic. The narrator should sound like a storyteller by a campfire, drawing the listener in. Not too dramatic, but not too flat. A balance of intimacy and authority. Music would play a key role. Low, ambient drones during the setup. Tense, rhythmic pulses during the crises. Swelling, orchestral scores during the reveals. Silence during the most impactful moments. Sound design would add immersion. The hum of the lights, the beep of the monitors, the rain on the pavement, the click of the pen. These small details create a world. If you are a creator, pay attention to sound design. It is half the experience. The theme of the Code Whisperer's style is grounded realism. No magic, no superpowers, just human beings with flaws and strengths navigating complex situations. Elena Vance is not a superhero. She is a highly trained professional. Her skills are learned, not innate. Her courage is chosen, not automatic. This distinction is important. It makes her relatable, it makes her achievable, it shows us that we too can develop competence. We too can choose courage. Believe in your potential. You are capable of more than you know. The ending of the story is open-ended. Elena returns to duty. She continues her service. Her story is not over, it is ongoing. This reflects real life. Justice is not a destination. It is a journey. Redemption is not a one-time event. It is a daily practice. We leave Elena in the field doing what she loves, saving lives, being kind, being strong. What do you think happens to Elena next? Write your own continuation in the comments. We love reading your creativity. In conclusion, They Mistook Her Kindness for Weakness Until She Took Charge is a story about the power of integrity. It is a reminder that how we treat others matters. That respect is earned, not demanded. That truth prevails. We hope this story stayed with you. We hope it inspired you. We hope it entertained you. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of this community. This is the final CTA. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe. It is the best way to support our work. We will see you in the next story. The screen fades to black. The music swells one last time, then fades into silence.